Here's a number that should stop any founder cold. Of all the customers you're going to lose this year, most of them you will lose in the first 90 days, and half of those in the very first week. The people who study subscription businesses have watched this for years. 2/3 of the customers who quit inside a year are already gone in the first 3 months. And it is probably not because your product is bad. It may not even be churn, not really. Those people never actually started. They signed up, they poked around for 2 minutes, they closed the tab, and they never came back. You didn't lose a customer. You lost someone who is never going to become one because they never reached the part where your product actually helped them. I've been on the wrong side of this number myself, so none of this is theory for me, and the whole answer is right here in this video. I'm not making you buy your way into it, so let me show you what's really happening in those first few minutes, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. A growth lead named Andrew Kaplan has spent hours watching real people sign up for software and then just leave. And what he found is brutal. At most companies, 30 to 40% of new users are gone within the first 7 minutes. 7 minutes. You spent months building the thing. You spent real money getting them to the door, and 1/3 of them walk back out before the coffee is even cool. So here's the reframe I want to hand you, and it's the whole reason for this video. You did not have a churn problem. You have an activation problem. Churn is when somebody who is getting real value decides to walk away. What you have is people who never got the value in the first place. They didn't quit on you, they never started. And those are two completely different problems with two completely different fixes. There's a growth advisor named Daphne Tidman who put real numbers on this. She looked at an app where 90% of people finished the onboarding. 90%. On paper, that's a triumph. Then she looked again, and most of them were gone by day 2. Finishing your onboarding is not the same as stealing your value. Answering a few setup questions is a box they ticked. It's not the moment your product made their life better. And once you see activation as the real problem, something strange starts to make sense, because Daphne also told a story about one client that honestly sounds backwards the first time you hear it. They made their onboarding longer, a lot longer, 3 times longer. Now, you'd expect everybody to give up and drop off halfway through. The exact opposite happened. What they actually did was this. The old onboarding was quick and easy. A few taps, a couple of simple questions, and you were in. Fast to finish, which is exactly what everyone tells you to build. The new one asked about 8 real questions. It took people 3 times as long to get through. It made them do a little more work up front, and it used that time to actually teach them something and show them what the product could do for their life. And more people finished it, not fewer, because the longer version made them feel right there in the first few minutes that this thing was actually for them. The revenue per user came out more than 10 times higher 2 weeks in. 10 times. From an onboarding that took longer, because that extra time wasn't friction, it was value. They weren't clicking through a setup wizard, they were starting to get their win. So the rule underneath all of this is simple, and I learned it the hard way a long time before anyone was saying the word onboarding. People do not buy better looking, they buy better working. Years ago, I was at a company building internet software, and we decided to grow by building a suite of Mac apps that turned a Mac into a server, email, Usenet News, all of it. And we thought they were gorgeous. Clean design, slick interface. I wrote the manual. We pressed real CDs, put them in glossy boxes, and we launched. And what we got back was crickets, just nothing. The people who needed that job done were already doing it on Unix. They didn't want a prettier screen. They wanted something rock solid and bulletproof. We'd built our whole pitch around our product. We never built it around their win. And that's the entire game. If your onboarding is a tour of your features, you're showing someone around your house. If it gets them to the thing they actually came for, you're handing them the keys. Okay, so if the first 30 days really do decide whether they stay, and the job is getting them to their win instead of through your feature door, what do you actually do about it on a Monday morning? Here's the plan you can run this week without buying a single new tool. You don't need software for this. You need a definition and a calendar. Start before week 1 even begins with the one thing everything hangs on. Write down in a single plain sentence the first moment a new user gets a real win from your product. Not signs up, not finishes the tour, gets a real result they actually wanted. For an invoicing tool, it might be they send their first real invoice and it gets paid. If you can't say that sentence out loud, your users can't find it either. That sentence is your whole target. Week 1 has exactly one job. Get them to that win as fast as humanly possible. Not a walk through every feature, one clear path to the first real result, and you cut every step that does not move them toward it. If they have to set up 5 things before anything good happens, you've built a hallway, not a front door. And if you have to do part of it for them by hand that first week, do it by hand. You're buying their first win. Weeks 2 and 3 are about turning that first win into a habit and about a fact most onboarding ignores. Not everyone came for the same reason. The person who bought your tool to save time needs a different second win than the person who bought it to look more professional to their clients. You don't need fancy software to tell them apart. You can just ask, right in the sign up, why are they here? And then point each answer at the win that actually fits it. By week 4, you ask one honest question about every new user. Are they getting the job done in their real life, or are they just poking at your product? And if you run a free trial, this matters even more because that trial clock is your entire activation window. Do not spend it giving them a guided tour. Spend it getting them one real win before the clock runs out. Signed up is a hope. Activated is a customer. Now, how do you actually get someone to their win faster? Well, you show them, you don't tell them. I learned this raising money for a surgical robotics company. When COVID hit and I couldn't get investors into a room, I built a little live demo studio at my desk. Instead of playing a canned video, I ran a real demo, live, every time, and showed each person the exact part I knew they cared about most. The live version landed where the polished slides never did. And the fastest way to find out what your users actually count as a win is embarrassingly low tech. Talk to 5 of them, not a survey, a real conversation. Ask the ones who stuck around what made them stay. Ask the ones who vanished what they were hoping for and never found. 5 honest conversations will tell you more about your first 30 days than a month of staring at a dashboard. If there's one mistake I would beg you to avoid, it's measuring the wrong thing and feeling good about it. Onboarding completion rates, trial start rates, tour finished. All of it can look wonderful on a chart while your actual customers quietly leak out the back. A number that climbs while your business does not is not a win. It's a distraction wearing a nice suit. So here's what I would generally love to know, and I might be wrong about some of this, so tell me if I am. What is the one moment in the very first week that a new user has to reach before you would call them a real customer? Tell me what your product does down in the comments, and I'll tell you where I would put that first win. And if you think this whole activation over churn idea is backwards, make the case. I read those too. I wrote a book for founders called Founders Who Finish and a newsletter called The Build. And both are available at davesaunders.net if you want to go deeper. And if you want more of these, subscribe. I put out a new one every week for people building something real.